My name is Kevin. I'm not sure where to begin, but I thought I'd start by sharing a bit about my past. I grew up without a father. Since I only knew a household without a father figure, it didn't feel strange to me. But around elementary school, I started to realize it wasn't exactly normal. I began to wonder, why didn't we have a father in our home? Some friends, without much thought, would sometimes bring it up. Hey, Kevin, why don't you have a dad at home? I couldn't answer that. After hearing it a few times, I couldn't help myself. I decided to ask my mom. Hey, Mom, why don't we have a dad at home? Right after I asked, I regretted it. She looked troubled, a bit lost. Kevin, But that's all she said, and then she went quiet. Seeing her like that, I understood. This was something I shouldn't have asked. I quickly put on a smile. Well, it's fine. You're twice as kind to me as any dad would be, so that's enough for me. And with that, I didn't wait for her to respond. I just ran outside to play. Living with just my mom didn't feel lonely. She worked late every night, on weekdays and weekends alike, so I did feel a little sad during things like open house days or school events. But I knew she was working hard for me, so I never thought of complaining. Feeling lonely was out of the question. So, I held it in. For big events, like entrance and graduation ceremonies, my mom always made it there and even celebrated with me. She'd come home every night, and we'd sleep in the same room. Not because I was clinging to her or anything. We just didn't have enough space. Since Mom was working alone, we didn't have much money. So we lived in an old apartment with a tiny living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and a single 6 tatami mat room. But I never thought to complain. It was just our life. I'd be alone in that little room, eating the food Mom prepared for me, taking a bath, setting out the futons, and waiting for her to come home. Mom and I slept in that 6 tatami room on 2 thin futons. Her back always looked so small. For some reason, though, I grew up tall, strong, and built. By the time I entered high school, I looked like a fully grown man. Because of that, I kept getting scouted for sports teams, but I figured I'd rather work a part-time job than join a club. One day, I brought a flyer to my mom. Mom, is it okay if I work here? The flyer was for a construction job. I'd seen it posted at a construction site I passed on my way to school, so I'd stopped by to ask about it. An older man who seemed to be in charge had given me this flyer. Mom took the paper, looked a bit surprised, and then started reading. After a few minutes, she looked up. But what about studying? High school only happens once. Why not enjoy it with a club or hanging out with friends? Well, honestly, I almost didn't go to high school. I wanted to start working and help out sooner. I smiled. Back when I was applying to high schools, I'd told her over and over. I wanted to start working as soon as I could to make things easier for her. But she'd always gently replied to me, Kevin, your teenage years only come once. Don't be afraid to make the most of them. You don't have to worry about money. Because my mom encouraged me like that, I decided to go to high school. Just having the opportunity to attend high school was a huge privilege for me. So I never even thought about wanting to hang out after school or join a club. No, I was planning on getting a job as soon as I turned 15. As long as you don't mind me working at this site, is it okay if I take the job? Thank you. Kevin, you're so thoughtful. And so, I began working at the construction site. There was a strong, handsome guy there. His name was Tom. He was friendly, easy to talk to, and genuinely kind. I quickly grew attached to him. Kevin, did you get something to eat? Yes. I ate 2 bowls. It's going to be hot again today. Make sure you stay hydrated. Yes. Thank you. Good. That's what I like to hear. Tom was 26. He was about 10 years older than me, but he had a youthful energy that made him feel like an older brother. Tom was also sort of my mentor, so he guided me with a mix of kindness and occasional strictness. He taught me more than just the job, he helped me prepare to step into the adult world and understand the kind of mindset I'd need. I really admired Tom. I wanted to grow up to be like him. The life lessons I learned from him went straight to my heart, much more naturally than the rules and regulations taught by teachers at school. In my mind, Tom became like the older brother I never had, or even the father I'd never known. With Tom and others at work supporting me, I worked hard. And most of my earnings went to support our household. Then, when I reached my senior year of high school, something happened. Kevin, have you thought about what you'll do after graduation? One day, Tom asked me. We're just a single-parent family, so I'm planning to start working right after high school. Is that so? Well, then, there's something I'd like to ask you. Tom hesitated for a moment, making me tilt my head in curiosity. Hey, Kevin. Would you be interested in working at this company with me? What? I was stunned. Work here? With Tom? I didn't hesitate. Are you serious? I'd love to work here. It was a no-brainer. Being able to work somewhere I felt motivated and enjoyed so much was all thanks to Tom. The idea of working alongside someone I admired felt like a dream. When he heard my response, Tom looked relieved. Great. I was a little worried you might say no. There's no way I'd say no. I replied with a big smile. It was a request from Tom, someone I admired deeply. Of course, I'd give him an enthusiastic yes. So, the three of us, my mom, Tom, and I made plans to have a meal together to celebrate. My mom worked at a small diner. She reserved it just for us that evening, so Tom could enjoy her cooking. It was the day after my graduation. The three of us gathered at the small diner where my mom worked. It was a modest place, but it was clean and had a pleasant atmosphere. The table was filled with dishes my mom had prepared. Nice to meet you. Thank you for always looking out for Kevin. I'm his mother. No, it's me who should thank you. Kevin's been such a big help to us. My name is Tom. Both of them looked a bit nervous as they bowed to each other. I stood beside them, smiling. Kevin's truly a bright, hard-working young man. He's been such a joy to have on site. Oh, no. Kevin's told me so much about you, Tom. I'm grateful for everything you've done for him. They spent a while complimenting each other, talking about me and my part-time job. I felt a bit embarrassed to be praised like that in front of both of them. Once the mood had relaxed a bit, Tom brought up the main topic. I'd like to officially ask if Kevin could work with us at K Construction. K Construction was the company where I'd been working part-time. Yes, Kevin mentioned it. I'd be so grateful if he could continue working with you. I'm still fairly young myself, but I promise to take care of him and look out for him. From what I've heard, I have complete faith in you. Please take good care of him. And so, I became a full-time employee. Of course, I was already familiar with the worksite, so it didn't feel like a major change. The main difference was that my status shifted from part-timer to full-time employee, bringing new responsibilities. I also began working full days instead of just after school or on weekends. Still, it was a lively work environment, and most importantly, Tom was there, making it a place where I felt completely comfortable. I worked harder than ever. The tasks I was assigned became more challenging, and my responsibilities grew. I was even entrusted with training some of the part-time workers. But I didn't mind the physical labor at all and took my work seriously. My contributions to the household tripled. And my mom told me she could finally relax a bit. Best of all, she was able to come home by early evening instead of working late into the night, which was a huge relief to me. I'd always worried that, if things continued like that, she might eventually get sick. My mom was always sacrificing her own comfort and needs. So when the old apartment was set to be renovated, I took the chance to move us into a place with one extra room. The rent was a little higher, but by then, it wasn't right for an 18-year-old man to be sharing the same room with his mom. Kevin, I'm really sorry that you didn't have your own room until now. My mom bowed her head apologetically. But the truth was, if I didn't have a room, it meant she didn't either. It wasn't only me who'd had to adjust. When I explained it to her in a way that wouldn't make her feel bad, she looked a little relieved. Though our new place was slightly farther out. It had 2 4.5 tatami rooms, a living room, bathroom, and kitchen. The building was still old, with thin walls. But it was a step up for us. My mom had always been careful with spending, but I wanted her to eat better and have nicer clothes. When I told her that, she couldn't help but cry. Time went on, and I turned 26. Tom was 37. I'd known him for more than a decade. One day, he approached me with a serious look on his face. Kevin. Sensing something big, I prepared myself. I'll be transferred to the main office. What? When I saw Tom's serious expression, I thought something bad had happened, but this was actually great news. I broke into a smile. So, this is a promotion, right? Congratulations. You're moving to the main office? That's amazing. You're really going up in the world. I was genuinely happy, as if it were my own success. Of course, I'd miss working with Tom. But more than that, I was thrilled that his hard work was being recognized by the company. Tom had always been kind, not just to me, but to everyone he met. Just as I looked up to him, many of the younger workers also saw him as a role model. He was that kind of person, someone everyone admired. Because of his skill in mentoring others, he was promoted to the HR department. I was truly happy for him, and though he seemed a bit conflicted, he looked pleased too. I asked you to work with me here at K Construction and even promised your mom I'd look after you. I'm sorry, Kevin. That day, Tom treated me, and we went out for a drink together. Don't be. I'm going to keep giving it my best here, so don't worry. I'm only grateful that you've been looking out for me for over 10 years. Though I'd miss him, I resolved to do my best at the branch office. And with that, Tom moved to the main office. Since I mostly worked on site, I didn't have many chances to take calls, but whenever I got a call from HR, there were times I'd get to talk to Tom. I worked hard at K Construction without him. Then, a few months later, I received a transfer order. The call from HR was, in fact, from Tom himself. Kevin. You might have already seen the transfer notice, but you're being assigned to one of our affiliate companies. And so, I found myself at a new workplace, assigned to the affiliate company. I introduced myself as I entered the office. Hello, everyone. I'm Kevin, and I'll be working here starting today. I attempted to introduce myself. However, my greeting was abruptly cut off. Chris. Can't you do anything right? Sorry. In front of me, a man who looked to be in his early 30s was yelling at an employee. My introduction was cut off by his reprimanding voice. His name, I learned, was Jason. He was 30 years old. A college graduate who joined the company as an elite recruit and was now the department head. He would be my new supervisor. But it wasn't just that moment, he was always high-handed with everyone in the office. Chris. Another mistake? What's wrong with you? Maybe you should have someone check what's going on in that head of yours. Sorry, Jason. The one who gets scolded the most is a guy named Chris. Yes, he does make a lot of mistakes, which isn't great, but even so, the way he's reprimanded is just too harsh. It's been a few months since I was transferred here, and I've gotten a feel for the office dynamics. But the relationship between Jason and Chris remains the most shocking thing I've seen in my working life. I'd certainly encountered strict people before. On site, mistakes can lead to serious injuries. So, there were people who would deliver harsh reprimands for that reason. But I'd never seen anyone talk down to others in such a demeaning way. Chris, you messed up the numbers again. What's the deal? Are you trying to mess with me? No, not at all. I'm very sorry. Oh, so you just like to make me mad, don't you? Is that it? Is that why you keep making these stupid mistakes? I'll fix it right away. Fixing it doesn't make it okay, idiot. Are you messing with me? Ha! I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The next day, Jason's voice echoed through the office again. Chris, you got the numbers wrong here again. I had to apologize to the client because of you. Are you trying to get yourself fired? Which numbers, exactly? That day felt a bit different from usual. Why do I have to tell you twice? Listen the first time. The numbers here. The ones I read out don't match your sloppy report. But the numbers you read are the same ones I have here. What? Are you saying I'm the one who got it wrong? Listening to the exchange, I checked my own notes. Chris often made mistakes, but he was never the type to shift blame onto others. If anything, his tendency to apologize quickly was something I'd always respected about him. So this time, I wondered if maybe Chris was actually right. That thought crossed my mind. You must have made a mistake in your notes. You're always so slow and full of errors. Looking at my notes, I saw that the numbers I'd written down matched Chris's report. In other words, Jason had read out the wrong numbers himself. Chris wasn't at fault here. Chris, not only are you constantly making mistakes, but now you're blaming others? Do you want to be fired? I finally couldn't hold back anymore. Jason, excuse me. Here are my notes. I don't believe Chris made any mistakes in the numbers. The figures you read out. Before I could finish, Jason snatched the paper from my hand. After glancing over the numbers, he tore my notes into shreds. Oh, so you're challenging me now, are you? The room filled with tension. Jason was known for lashing out whenever things didn't go his way. And once he marked someone as an enemy, he would go after them relentlessly. Most people just tried to stay off his radar. But I just directly confronted him. Everyone around looked on with concern, wondering what would happen next. Kevin, who do you think you are? Your notes? You're the one who got it wrong, along with Chris. I spoke calmly. There was no point in escalating the situation. I sit right next to Chris and occasionally help him with his work. For that reason, I take notes on the numbers you read out, just in case. Oh, so you fed him the wrong numbers, didn't you? This time, I didn't communicate any numbers to Chris. It's highly unlikely that we both recorded the same incorrect numbers by coincidence. Oh, I see. You two are working together to set me up, aren't you? Is this fun for you? Suddenly, realizing he was losing ground, Jason tried to twist the situation. I stood firm and replied. In this case, Chris is not at fault. I can vouch for him. Hearing this, Jason's face turned bright red, and he stormed out of the room. Chris turned to me and murmured apologies. Kevin, I'm really sorry. You really saved me. He kept bowing to me over and over, clearly grateful. Chris made mistakes often, but he was a genuinely good person. I just didn't think you were at fault. I'm sorry if I overstepped. I did worry that my interference might only escalate Jason's harassment of Chris. But Chris continued to express his gratitude. Not at all. I can't thank you enough for standing up for me. A few hours later, I was called in by one of the executives. Kevin, I heard you went against Jason. Go apologize to him right now. Although the executive outranked Jason, his tone was unusually deferential. Puzzled, I replied, I don't believe I said anything wrong. Regardless, you spoke out of line, didn't you? You shouldn't be disrespectful to your superior. Disrespectful. I had only corrected him on a mistake he made. If that counted as disrespect, then what Jason was doing to Chris every day was downright humiliating. Anyway, just try to keep things calm, okay? With that, the executive patted my shoulder and left. Shortly after, Chris, who seemed to have overheard the conversation, called me over to the emergency stairwell. "What's going on?" I asked. "Kevin, actually. Jason is related to one of the senior board members." "Oh, is that so?" Suddenly, everything made sense. So that's it. The executives were tiptoeing around the board member, letting Jason do as he pleased to stay in his good graces. If you make him angry, your prospects could suffer. So, Kevin, maybe it's best to just go along with him, as strange as it sounds. I know you stood up for me, and I'm really grateful, but I worry this might cause problems for you down the line. Chris carefully chose his words, clearly concerned. I understood his worry. But what Jason had done that day had gone too far. I get it, Chris. But if you're constantly dealing with this kind of unreasonable treatment, isn't it taking a toll on you? It must make it hard to stay motivated. Every single day, Chris gets scolded relentlessly over minor mistakes. For example, if his process is slightly different from Jason's preferences. I think everyone should be allowed to have their own way of doing things, as long as the job gets done correctly. To me, as long as the final result was correct, the process should be left up to the individual. But Jason would constantly criticize him over details, saying things like, "Didn't I tell you to enter those numbers first?" Or, "Aren't you going to bring the printed documents?" It didn't matter if Chris collected one page at a time or waited to gather several, either way, the outcome was the same. And if Chris tried to explain, saying, "I was going to get both pages at once since I had two to print," Jason would yell, "What if your papers got mixed with someone else's?" And even say things like, "The printer isn't your personal property." Chris wasn't printing hundreds of pages or leaving things sitting there. If he was printing in large batches or leaving it for too long, sure, that would be a problem. But to be scolded over something as minor as 2 pages was beyond ridiculous. Watching Jason's relentless nitpicking day after day created a stifling, oppressive atmosphere for everyone around. Thank you, Kevin. Just having one person who supports me makes a huge difference. I'll manage somehow, I just have to endure it. Chris. Besides, my family is struggling financially. My mother passed away, and my father's health is poor. So I have to cover our living and medical expenses. Chris gave a weary smile. I understand. I grew up in a single-parent household too. This shared background brought us closer. And we began talking more, often catching up during lunch breaks. Then, just after the afternoon work began, Jason suddenly approached my desk. Kevin, I have a job for you. With a loud thud, he dumped a huge stack of papers on my desk. What's this? I turned to see what he'd placed. A bundle of about 500 sheets. Then, he started stacking box after box of paperwork around my desk, filling the area with cardboard boxes. Take all of this, remove every staple, and shred it. Got that? And make sure to remove every clip, too. Once you're done shredding, take the waste to the dumpster. This isn't part of my job, I said. Being suddenly handed a pile of menial tasks would interfere with my regular responsibilities. Jason, however, looked at me with a fierce, almost demonic expression. Who do you think you're talking back to? If I say this is your job, then it's your job. Jason. I can take care of this, Chris interjected. Chris had indeed been the one stuck with most of these tasks before. Shut up, Chris. I'm in charge of assigning tasks. Keep your mouth shut. And so, from that day on, I became Jason's new target for harassment. Every day, he came up with increasingly petty ways to bother me. Not only that, but he started spreading negative rumors about me to clients, giving me false information during calls, and meddling with the tasks that were actually my responsibility. As this dragged on, the stress began to wear me down. One evening, I decided to stop by the diner where my mom worked. Going home to an empty, dark apartment feels lonely. It's hard to return to that kind of solitude. I just want to see my mom's face. When I arrived, I saw the closed sign on the front door. I knocked gently, hoping for a quick word before heading home, and stepped inside. Mom appeared from behind the counter. "Oh, Kevin. What brings you here?" "Oh, nothing." I couldn't bring myself to tell her that I'd come because of how rough things were at work, so I made up an excuse. I was nearby on business, so I thought I'd stop by on my way home. "I see," she replied. Just then, I noticed a figure moving at the far end of the counter. I hadn't realized there was someone else here. "Oh. I'm sorry." Without realizing it, I'd interrupted their conversation. The man smiled warmly and said, "No need to apologize." Since the closed sign was up, he probably wasn't a customer. I raised an eyebrow, curious. "Your son?" he asked. "Yes, I'm her son, Kevin." Not knowing who he was, I introduced myself politely. The man nodded, saying, "I see. I see," with a hint of emotion in his eyes. As I watched him, I began to get an inkling of what was going on. The man looked to be around my mother's age, and was dressed well, with an air of refinement. Maybe, just maybe, I suddenly felt uneasy. Sensing this, the man began to tell me everything. That night, I found myself unable to sleep. The next morning, I went to work as usual, and there was Jason, smirking at me. Then, he tossed a brochure at me. On the cover, it said Australia. "Can't you figure it out?" Jason sneered, noticing my puzzled expression. "It's the company trip. Go ahead and make the reservations." With that, he walked away. The trip was scheduled to take place in about 40 days. I hurried to make the reservation and finalize all the preparations. On the day of the company trip, I arrived at the airport. Even 5 minutes before the meeting time, no one else had shown up. 80 people were supposed to be on this trip. With so many people, it was definitely strange for no one to be there, so I decided to call Jason. "What's up?" Jason's voice sounded almost gleeful, as if he'd been waiting for this moment. "It's the meeting time, and no one's here." I thought I'd call to check. I could hear bustling sounds in the background, so I asked, "Where are you right now?" "Right now?" "At a hot spring inn in Atomy." "Excuse me?" "It's the company trip." "The company trip?" What was he talking about? The plan was to go to Australia. Atomy, man, Atomy. Everyone's in Atomy. Oh, except Chris. I told him the destination changed to Tohoku and to meet us at the Shinkansen station. He's probably wandering around the station right about now, totally lost. I heard laughter from the employees around him. "Oh, and by the way, you'll be covering the cancellation fee." "Thanks a lot." This was beyond forgiveness. I spoke in a low voice. "Got it. You're all fired." "What?" "I'll go through HQ and make sure every last one of you gets terminated." My tone in the phrase "through HQ" must have shaken him because his tone suddenly changed. "Wait, what do you?" I hung up right there. Then, I noticed several missed calls from Chris. And I called him back. "Kevin. I just got a call from Jason saying the destination changed, but no one's here." I explained the situation to the bewildered Chris. He sounded angry too. Why would they pull something like this? They'll get what's coming to them. Just wait. I looked forward to the end of the 4-day trip they thought they were enjoying. When Monday came, Jason and the others returned from their Atomy getaway, grinning smugly and shooting glances at Chris and me. What was that again? Getting fired? Going through HQ? Can't wait to see how that pans out. Jason laughed. The surrounding employees chuckled, some even breaking out into loud laughter. All right, you two lackeys, get on with the cleaning. Then start on the shredding. And if you're 5 minutes late, there's a penalty. Laughter filled the room. Just then, a low, commanding voice cut through the noise. I see, so this is the kind of environment you've created here. A deep male voice sounded, and everyone in the office turned toward the entrance. There stood Dad. Alongside the middle-aged man was Jason's father, Robert, who was the executive of our company, and next to him, Tom, who waved at me with a smile. Excuse me, but outsiders aren't allowed in here, Jason said to the older man and Tom. Immediately, Robert rebuked him. Don't be rude. This man is Mr. Anderson, the CEO of K Construction. Mr. Anderson? Jason looked absolutely stunned. Of course. Since we're just a subsidiary, it's understandable he'd never met the CEO of the main company before. But here he was, the CEO himself. The five of us, Mr. Anderson, Robert, Jason, Tom, and myself, were then gathered in the meeting room. I hear there's been a consistent pattern of harassment from you, Jason, the CEO said, looking directly at him. I briefly explained what had been happening. Jason quickly interrupted, desperate to defend himself. Mr. Anderson, this is all Kevin's fabrication. I have indeed provided guidance, but it was purely professional. There was no harassment whatsoever. Jason rambled on, spinning one lie after another. At that moment, Mr. Anderson nodded and said, Let's hear that audio. Certainly. Tom replied, playing the recording he'd prepared. The recording contained countless instances of Jason's abusive comments directed at Chris, dating back to shortly after I'd arrived at the office. What? Jason turned pale. I added. The truth is, my transfer here was to investigate complaints about Jason's abuse of authority submitted by other employees. There was also a complaint from the previous manager here, Tom continued. When the previous manager opposed Jason's harassment, he was transferred under pressure from Deputy Director Robert. Jason's eyes widened in shock at this revelation. These verbal abuses toward Chris are unacceptable, and the incident with the company trip is inexcusable, Tom said. Then, the audio of Jason's instructions and his mocking remarks from Atomy played from the recorder, making everything perfectly clear. And so, Mr. Anderson concluded, you're fired. This kind of conduct can't be overlooked. We will inform you two of your termination. Robert and Jason. Jason's voice rose in desperation. What? Why? Firing us just like that, now that's abuse of authority on your part. You're dragging me down with you. As Jason and his father, Robert, began protesting loudly, the CEO's assistant entered and promptly escorted the two out of the meeting room. Mr. Anderson then turned back to me, his expression softening. I'm truly sorry for putting you through such a difficult task. It's all right. It was my job, and I wanted to help Tom too, I replied. Your effort means a lot, and I owe you my thanks and an apology, not just from my father, but from me as well. Tom added, bowing his head respectfully. That's right. Tom was actually the son of Mr. Anderson. The man who'd visited my mom's diner recently was none other than Mr. Anderson himself. Since he had a different last name from Tom, I hadn't realized they were related, but they were, in fact, father and son. Apparently, Mr. Anderson had heard a lot about me through Tom and had decided to visit my mom's diner to meet her. During that visit, they discovered that my mother and Mr. Anderson were childhood friends. Despite nearly a decade age difference, my mother had often played with him when she was little. Initially, I had thought Mr. Anderson might be my father. But after hearing the full story, I understood the true connection. My mom and the CEO were lifelong friends, and Tom and I had met entirely by chance. Realizing this felt almost like destiny, and I was moved by the connection. After that, Jason and Robert were dismissed, and I was able to return to my original position at K Construction. The employees who had supported Jason's antics at the affiliate company were also appropriately dealt with, allowing Chris to work in a much healthier environment. And now, Tom is working with me in the same office. I'm genuinely happy to be back working alongside him. From here on, I'm determined to value the people around me and work hard at the job I love.